It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when my neighbor Mr. Anderson knocked on our front door. My family had lived in this neighborhood for years, but we never really interacted much with him. He was a tall, reserved man in his 60s with silver stray hair and a quiet demeanor. Most days he could be seen tending to his garden, watering the roses that lined his white picket fence. I always thought he was just a solitary man who preferred his own company that day. However, something felt different. His knock was firm but hesitant. When Jessica Adams pulled into the driveway of her childhood home, her hands trembled on the steering wheel. It had been 3 years since she had last set foot inside, 3 years since she had drawn a hard boundary between herself and the tangled mess of emotions that came with her family. But now she was back, summoned by a simple text from her younger sister Emily. "Mom needs us, come home." Jessica exhaled, gripping the keys tightly before stepping out of the car. The air was thick with the scent of summer, a stark contrast to the heavyweight pressing against her chest. The white two-story house loomed before her, its familiarity both comforting and suffocating. She was here, and there was no turning back now. The door swung open before she could knock. Emily stood in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed, her arms wrapping around Jessica before she had a chance to protest. "I'm glad you came," Emily murmured. Jessica stiffened for a moment before letting herself return the embrace. "How bad is it?" she asked. Emily stepped back and gestured for Jessica to come inside. "She's not doing great. Her heart condition is worse than she let on." Jessica followed her sister into the house, the smell of lemon cleaner and old books greeting her. It was exactly the same, and yet everything felt different. She walked into the living room where their mother Diane sat in her recliner, a blanket draped over her frail frame. Her once vibrant auburn hair had thinned, now more gray than red. The sharp eyes that used to cut through Jessica like a blade were softer, now tinged with something that looked almost like regret. "Hi, Mom," Jessica said, her voice more tentative than she wanted it to be. Diane's lips curled into a tired smile. "Jessica, you came." Jessica nodded, unsure of what to say. The last time they spoke they had ended in a shouting match, accusations flying like daggers. Words that couldn't be unsaid had been spoken, but now none of that seemed to matter. Over the next few days Jessica fell into an uneasy rhythm. She and Emily took turns preparing meals, sorting through their mother's medications, and handling the small everyday things that Diane could no longer do for herself. Conversations were stilted at first, but the weight of shared memories began to bridge the distance between them. One evening, as Jessica helped Diane to bed, her mother reached for her hand. "I know I wasn't the mother you needed," Diane admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I pushed you too hard, I expected too much, and when you left I didn't know how to fix it." Jessica swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. She had spent years resenting her mother's impossible standards, the constant criticism, the feeling that nothing she did was ever enough. But seeing Diane now, small, fragile human, made her realize that the past, while painful, didn't have to dictate the future. "I needed space," Jessica said, her voice thick with emotion, "but I didn't stop loving you." Diane's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I know, and I hope maybe we can start over." Jessica hesitated, then gave a small nod. "We can try." Healing was an instant, nor was it easy, but as the days turned into weeks the wounds of the past began to mend, thread by fragile thread, and for the first time in a long time Jessica allowed herself to believe that family, however complicated, was still worth fighting for. Jessica found herself falling into old habits, though this time they came with a gentler approach. She remembered the way her mother used to hum while cooking, the way she'd sit by the window with a book in her lap, but never really reading, just staring out at the world as if she were waiting for something. Jessica had spent her teenage years convinced that Diane was disappointed in her, that she was a burden rather than a daughter, but now she saw the truth in the lines on her mother's face. There had been love there all along, hidden beneath layers of expectations and unspoken fears. One afternoon Emily and Jessica sat on the porch swing, the air warm and buzzing with cycas Do you think she's really changing? Emily asked, glancing toward the living room where Diane sat watching an old movie. Jessica sighed. I think she wants to, and that's something. Emily hesitated before speaking again. I always envied you. You know, you got out, you made a life for yourself. I stayed because I was too scared to leave. Jessica turned to her sister, startled by the admission. I thought you stayed because you wanted to. I thought you loved being the one she relied on. Emily gave a small, bitter laugh. No, I stayed because I didn't know how to do anything else, but now maybe it's time for me to figure out what I want. Jessica reached for her sister's hand, squeezing it gently. Then we'll figure it out together. As the weeks passed, Diane's health continued to decline. Some days were better than others, but the reality of the situation was clear. They were running out of time. One evening, as Jessica sat by her mother's bedside, Diane reached for her hand again. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Tears welled in Jessica's eyes. I wish you had told me that sooner. Diane's fingers squeezed hers weakly. Me too, but I'm telling you now. Jessica stayed by her mother's side that night, listening to the slow, steady breathing, memorizing every detail of the moment. When the morning came and Diane didn't wake up, Jessica felt an ache deep in her chest, but it wasn't just grief, it was also gratitude. They had found each other again, even if only for a little while. The funeral was small, intimate. Friends and family gathered, sharing stories, laughter mixing with tears. Emily and Jessica stood side by side, finding comfort in each other, and as they walked away from the gravesite, Jessica took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past finally begin to lift. The road to healing wasn't easy, but it was one worth walking, and with Emily by her side, she knew she wouldn't have to walk it alone.